8 o'clock hour. We'll talk with Brian Kilmeade coming up at 8 o'clock today here on Richmond's Morning News. And again, I'm going to read the best text messages at 6:55, 7:55, 8:55, and then in the 9 o'clock hour, we take your telephone calls up until Brian Kilmeade at 10 o'clock. All right, let's get to some news item that came down last week, but we haven't had a chance to discuss this morning. The Commonwealth of Virginia is being sued by the feds. For what? Because normally it's Jay Jones, our attorney general, who ran on the promise, I'm going to sue Donald Trump. I'm going to stand up to this administration. I'm going to take on the mean orange man in the White House. Well, the Commonwealth of Virginia is now going to be sued by the DOJ. So we'll spend a bunch of our tax dollars over this. The General Assembly got together along with Governor Abigail Spanberger. A law went into effect here, which you knew when you passed it in the General Assembly, and she knew when it was signed into law that it was never going to pass muster, because the state doesn't get to tell federal law enforcement what they can and cannot do. And the law we're talking about bans Customs and Border Patrol and ICE agents from wearing face coverings while they're doing their jobs here in Virginia. So Todd Blanche, the acting Attorney General, soon to be permanent in that role, has decided to sue the Commonwealth. California also passed one of these ridiculous laws. Did a couple other states did as well, but Virginia will be the one they sue first. And normally when I hear the federal government suing a state, I go, boo. On this one, I'm going to clap and go, yes, and I hope they win. And I'm going to tell you why. Now, you're going to disagree with me, some of you. I get it. That's all right. 833-804-1140, 833-804-1140 is the James River Air text line, and you can call us after the 9 o'clock hour. We'll put you on the air. But here's the way I look at this, okay? All of our institutions that keep this country strong are being torn apart. They're being shredded right now. One of the big ones is law enforcement. So let me run through where we've been over the last decade or so when it comes to law enforcement. I don't think law enforcement has been looked at in the same side eye with contempt since the 1960s. And it's funny because the people that you see out there protesting and driving all of this agenda are the leftover hippies from the 1960s with their dopey No Kings rallies. But I digress. Let me just run through this. Do you remember Hands Up? That turned out to be not true. And it gave us ACAB. Have you seen that graffitied somewhere? All cops are children of unmarried people. It's a family show, so I won't say what it means. And it starts pushing down our admiration and our trust in law enforcement, and it's just been deteriorating ever since. So then we get up to Minnesota and ICE and Customs and Border Patrol. What happened was the border between Mexico and the United States was left unguarded. And we had NGOs and we had cartels that were bringing people up, pushing them across the border. I saw it on a daily basis. I lived in Arizona. And the Customs and Border Patrol that works those sectors that you hear about in Tucson and Yuma and down in Texas were completely overwhelmed. And we had to bring ICE agents, normally the guys running around in a windbreaker and a pair of khakis, down to the border just to process, because we are so overwhelmed that we completely collapsed our immigration protection. Customs Border Patrol works along the border. If you catch somebody within 2 weeks and within 50 miles of the border, they get immediately, they don't go to court. They're not taken into custody. They're immediately returned on the other side of the border per our immigration laws. They don't get to go see a judge or anything. If you're here illegally, within 50 miles of the border, within 2 weeks of entering the country, without question, you just get put back across the border. But what happened was we had so many people show up asking for asylum, showing up at border points of entry or being caught, that in order to process all these people, the ICE officers had to be redeployed down to the border just for the paperwork. Then once that was over and the surge stopped and the border was sealed, now you got to go find all these people that came across illegally that were released into the country that don't belong here. That's where Customs and Border Patrol had to leave what they normally do, which is fighting with the cartels. They literally take on paramilitary cartel members and the coyotes and the traffickers. Now you have to put them in the interior of the United States. And I'll be honest, now that it's all said and done, the situation in Minnesota grew out of control for a lot of different reasons. The Customs and Border Patrol agents are not used to working in non-border towns. And they were put in a position because protesters engaged them on a daily basis, and it got completely out of control. And instead of helping to soothe the situation and to calm everything down, Jacob Fry, the William and Mary grad that's the mayor of Minneapolis, just made it hotter. Tim Walz made it hotter. They emboldened the protesters. The ICE agents and the Customs and Border Patrol agents were under attack, and it got completely out of control. Could they have reacted differently? Yeah. Should the people of Minnesota acted differently? 100%. Should the leadership in Minnesota have done a better job? You bet. Perfect storm. Everybody could have done a better job. Now you see this go on in New Jersey at a facility that's been operating for a long time. And you see the same tactics, and you see the same lack of responsibility, and you see the same thing repeating it, and they're trying to start another Minneapolis in New Jersey right now. The governor is okay, not doing a great job, in my opinion, of stopping all of this. And certainly the Democratic lawmakers ain't doing anything to stop the mayhem up there either. But you see where they're just trying to repeat this each and every place they can. And what that does is, the big picture, it degrades law enforcement, because when you see people attacking law enforcement and they feel like it's justified, then what else am I going to attack? There's a great kids book. What happens, Dave? Have you ever read this book? What happens when you give a cookie to a mouse?
Does it keep coming back for more?
It's going to want a glass of milk. And once you give it a glass of milk, it's going to want a napkin. And once you give it a napkin, it's going to want a place to sit. And once you give it a place to sit, it's going to want to take a nap. And then it's going to want to watch TV. If you give someone something, like I'm doing something dumb. I give the squirrels in my neighborhood a peanut. That means more squirrels are going to show up in my house, right?
You're encouraging bad behavior.
By the squirrels, okay? Once you give somebody something and you give them an inch, they're going to take a mile, and that's what's going on over here. That's what's also going on. Once I show you that I can attack these ICE officers and this Customs and Border Patrol officer, then everybody wears a badge. In my opinion, now should be suspect because I looked at these people over there. That's the mindset of the protesters. So I will tell you this, for someone who ran on a law enforcement background, you saw all of those ads by sheriffs. Hey, I remember this one very clearly. The sheriff looked at the camera and said, hey, you mess with one of us, we don't take this standing up. We stand up for our own. You remember those ads, right? When the governor was running for office? I guess it doesn't work both ways, because as a former federal law enforcement officer, as a postal inspector, she wanted these sheriffs and these police officers and these ads to have her back. But she doesn't have the back of other federal officers and other federal agents. She says, oh, they're undertrained, they're this, they're that. We need to have them take off the masks. And we've shown you why they put the masks on, is because these crazy leftists that you see in Minneapolis, that you see going on in New Jersey, and we've seen it here, will dox these officers and put their families and their homes in jeopardy. And if you don't believe me, we've actually had it happen here in Virginia with Tony Pham, who goes on with Jeff Katz all the time. His family was doxxed while he was at work. People showed up to harass him, intimidate his wife and his kids. But we saw fit to pass this law that tells the feds you can't wear these face coverings when you go out. And by the way, the big reason why they have to go out in public in the first place, if you would honor these ICE detainers saying, you pick someone up, they're here illegally, they committed a crime, you're about to release them, give ICE the heads up so they could pick them up and put them through the process of being deported. Then we get to go pick them up in the jails, and I don't have to send 5 officers to swarm onto a house to find somebody who's here, who's a dangerous criminal, who's here illegally, and I sweep up everybody else who's with them in that house who was here illegally that they wouldn't have gone after in the first place if the one guy had been picked up in jail. But now the governor signed this law, and the feds are going to come back and they're going to tell her, you do not have the ability to sign a law in Virginia to have any influence or say in how federal officers do their job. And by the way, you're putting them at risk. I want to know what you think. 833-804-1140, 833-804-1140. I hope that this is taken up by the court, and I hope we right this wrong here in Virginia, because the bottom line is, when you start chipping away at ICE and Custom and Border Patrol, you chip away at everybody who wears the badge, which puts public safety in danger. 833-804-1140. All right, coming up on the program, Brian Kilmeade. We got that all figured out. Brian Kilmeade, we'll talk to him coming up at 8:05 this morning. It's been a busy morning this morning on Richmond's Morning News. Okay, let's talk about Lester by Adolph. You know, Father's Day is coming up. What are you going to get your dad for Father's Day?